Good evening, everybody. Hope you're having a great night. Thanks for joining us. We'll get rolling here in just a minute. Yeah, if you didn't already see the pour list, Kurt has put it into the chat. So you'll have it there. We're going to start with the lower ABV sherried bottlings, starting with the two finishes, then with the full term maturation sherried Edradour. And then we're going to go into the cask strength 1990s bottlings, which is kind of cool. I didn't put that together, but they're all from the 90s, which is sort of fun. While we're waiting for some stragglers, because there are definitely some, this tasting was a sellout. And Sammy, thanks for your feedback on the samples. I know Sammy does a big chunk of those with Harmony as well. Harmony does all the labels. So we definitely, we've put some pride into that, and we've been tweaking it as we go along. And, you know, if people have ideas, we're always open to, you know, to some comments, but thank you for that. So while we're waiting, and on the subject of virtual tastings, I'm just going to share my screen quickly because we have a couple of newish ones as well as ones coming up. The next one that there's tickets for is not until August. That's the Nothing But North Star Whiskeys. I really should email Ian Croucher again and at least get him to record something. He never did reply to that email asking if he wanted to co-host at an ungodly hour in the UK. But if you had no other reason to take part in this tasting, it would be for the Robin's Egg Blue bottling, which is a 31-year-old Glendronach, which you don't see too often. Independent bottling. I'm not going to lie to you. The whole reason we did this tasting was so that we could open one of those bottles so we could try it. We figured if we wanted to try it, probably a bunch of you want to try it too. So that's coming up. The virtual outturn for the Scotch Malt Whisky Society for August is coming up as well too. There's still some spots in that. Sample kits will be poured for that next week. And then we've got old first malt editions casks, which is a mouthful. But essentially it's a range of old malt cask and first editions bottlings, and technically also an old and rare. But I think it would have just gotten too clunky if we tried to somehow put an ampersand in there. I'm not sure that would have worked. Regardless, that's coming up. There's some spots. Kurt, the Knockdew is kind of the showstopper in this one, right?
Yeah, so I wanted to be mad at that. We see those prices on that one, and I 100% have to admit, Lee came in for us through a range of these, and it was immediately the catalyst for building a tasting. And that Knockdew is a cracker. You got to try it.
Yeah. And some of these other ones like the Tamdew and the other cask strength, I think are interesting. So it'll be a fun lineup. We got a whole bunch of Berry Brothers and Rudd casks. And we're doing a tasting with them. 5 of the 7 whiskeys, actually 6 of the 7 whiskeys are our single casks. So that's coming up later in August 22nd. Then we've got Blinded by Bourbon with Harmony and Evan on August 24th. Not sure what they're pouring, and if we knew, we couldn't tell you because it's supposed to be a blind tasting. So that's coming up. This is the best title we could come up with for this tasting. It's a fusion of Glen Scotia and Loch Lomond whiskeys. Essentially, to highlight, I know the bottle, oh, here it is, the bottle, our new cask of Loch Lomond 11-year-old, which is a fruit bomb. And compared to other single cask bottlings we do at this time in this environment, almost dirt cheap. But it's going to be a cool lineup. We've got a bottle of Glen Scotia 25 teed up for that tasting. So there'll be some cool whiskeys in there, and a late entry. We didn't think we were going to have it, but we actually have Loch Lomond 18 for that tasting as well too. So that'll be a great range and fun, something to check out. And then the whiskey trail, we've got some cool bottlings in here. The coolest is probably the Crofton Gia, which I never thought that would be the most exciting whiskey in a range, but it's pretty cool. Also, we wanted to open the Rosebank and the Single Malts of Scotland Bunnahabhain. So they're in that tasting too, and that's why it costs what it does. But it would have been more expensive, and I can't tell you why it would have been more expensive, but just trust me on this, it would have been more expensive, but for something. And then last but not least, we've got our Spirits Festival coming up in store. Evan, Harmony, and some of the other crew, Sean, are really excited about that one. The only thing we can tell you is there will not be any Scotch. There might be bourbon, there might be other whiskeys, but it's going to be rum, cognac, gin, I'm guessing. There better not be any vodkas though, because what's the point? I mean, all those other spirits are about tasting something. Why feature something that tastes like nothing? But other than that, I probably will not. I'll let them do what they want for it, except no vodka.
Sammy will have an absinthe table if he has his way.
Sammy does want an absinthe table. I think a table of absinthe might be like several bottles too many of absinthe, but that's just me. All right, enough about that. We've got our lineup here. We've got almost half of you logged in, so let's get rolling. Signatory's been one of those independent bottlers that I think for a long time, and this is going back like 10, 15 years, we were one of the main, if not one of the only stores really working with their products. A lot of people didn't get independent bottlings. I've been impressed with the overall quality of Signatory bottlings. I think it's remained high. I think they're one of the few independent bottlers that still has a reasonable amount of cool old stuff. And we won't include Gordon MacPhail in that category because if we did, it wouldn't really be fair. But if Gordon MacPhail is the gold standard, then like Signatory has to be like the silver level of independent bottler. Like their quality is high. They've got cool stuff. They buy things and hold on to them for decades. Like they don't just go hand to mouth like a lot of other independent bottlers do. And the reason I know this, I've been through their warehouses several times, and you see they've got parcels, like dozens and dozens of casks of the same vintage from the same distilleries. And you know what that tells you is that they're buying stuff and then deciding which ones are good enough to be bottled young and leaving the ones that aren't to mature longer. And in the case of the first two whiskeys that we've got tonight, maybe realizing that they're okay, but they're not that exciting. Let's finish them in sherry and see how they turn out. And that's where we're going to start off with here tonight. We're starting off with the Linkwood, and I'll share my screen so you can see it. It's got a lovely hue to it if you're into that. I know a lot of people are. 46%, a marriage of two sherry butts, 201 and 203, according to our label and presumably that label. So finished in first fill Oloroso sherry. And Kurt, I know you're a fan of Linkwood as well too. Gordon MacPhail does a lot of Linkwood and sherry, and it seems to do okay in it. But Linkwood also, I always think of Linkwood, if I was to have one word to describe it, to me, it's pillowy. It's this like soft, fluffy, floral, fruity spirit. I mean, it's got weight, like that it can stand up to sherry, but I've had great Linkwoods that were like super naked and young as well.
Yeah, it's for those that are kind of geeky with Linkwood or have gone deep in terms of the years. Some of the greatest old whiskeys I've ever had were Linkwoods. Andrew can probably attest. Some of like the way back in the 60s and stuff, those really, really heavily sherry Linkwoods were absolutely incredible. I think it's what Diageo considers one of their top dressing malts. They use it for a lot of blends to bring that fruitiness that Andrew talks about. It's a style I'm a sucker for. I do generally prefer it in bourbon, but Andrew, I'm kind of curious on this one. Sticking my nose in it, I would almost guess this was one of the earlier versions of Aberlour at a lower strength and without the slightly floral note that I usually get from Aberlour.
Well, and I guess maybe it's because of the ABV, like the bottling reduced strength without that hit. Because like Aberlour, because it was cask strength, those young sherry bombs tended to have a bit of a punch to them. I can see that, but I mean, to me, I'm not saying that I would ever guess this as Linkwood blind. I think that would be anyone who could do that, that would be pretty bloody impressive with the cues that are there for you. But it works well with the sherry. I'm always, and Kurt, I know you're somewhat the same. I'm not always a big fan of finishing because I think a lot of times it's done with a very heavy hand. This doesn't feel like it's been done with a heavy hand.
I don't think finishing is... There's times when it works, but it's what we call the happy accidents, I think, just like talk about good grain whiskeys and stuff. I think most finishing, if you're doing that, you already know your whiskey's not great, or else you wouldn't have done that. It's lipstick on a pig, right? Sometimes it works, sometimes it dresses it up a little bit. And generally, if your whiskey's good, I think a finish isn't necessarily going to hurt it, but you can't use it as a base. I don't know if this is one of those cases where they tried doping it that way, but to me, this works really kind of harmoniously. I like it. I saw some of your notes on there. I like those figgy kind of tones you're getting. I get a bit of tobacco with all those Aberlour fruity things. And I think most surprising to me, it's that new school of sherry in the sense that it's like probably seasoned casks, more on the spices and everything there too, which tend to be a little stewier than jammy. But this still has a lot of that jamminess that's kind of old school too. It's kind of somewhere in the middle. I'm surprised by that.
Yeah, the nose and the palate, it's got a nice balance of sweet, fruits, spice. It's not what I would call a sherry bomb. Like it's not sort of drowning in sherry notes. So I think it's got a nice balance to it. You know, I know we like drinking whiskeys at Cask Strength, but let's be honest, you can't drink Cask Strength all the time, all day, all night, or you probably won't have a very long life, or at least you're going to have a really rough next morning. So at 46, like I think this drinks nicely. It's got nice flavor, and the sherry is there, but it's not sort of the only show in town, which is, I know some people chase that sort of profile, but if you're chasing that profile, why not just drink sherry?
The back end's got a lot of like dark licorice tones for me, and a little bit more tannic, a little more drippy back there. But
Well,
I like the nose part of the
new
palate, but it's decent. Sorry?
That's that new school sherry that you're talking about. Like it's
Yeah.
really spice forward. I mean, for new school sherry, this is nice. You know, I think it drinks well. It's got a nice long finish to it, but it still has that pillowy, floral, soft, fruity, linkwoodiness that I like about the spirit. So it's sherried without hiding how interesting Linkwood is.
That's a cool one. It's not quite in my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Get
Well,
started.
we're somewhat spoiled, let's be honest. And I mean, you know, I think, I don't know about you, but I'm most excited about the back end of the lineup, not because of their age, but because they're probably all refill. And they're refill with some age, which is like, that's the magic territory for me. So
I've tried 3 of the latter ones and they are awesome, but I was more excited about these young ones because you know as well as I do, we never drink these, right? And when we're trying to sell them, we want to be able to talk about them. I wouldn't necessarily gravitate towards these. That first one though, that Linkwood, I know we shouldn't talk too long because we got the next one to go to, but Andrew, you've sat in a lot of like little British pubs and things like that, and whiskey bars like Highlander and places like that. This to me has that kind of, you smell whiskey, you smell like meat pies cooking in the background. Like it's kind of got that old woodiness, and it smells like Scottish bars to me. It's kind of cool.
venison sausage coming out. So yeah, I like that note. It does have that kind of, it's an old and slightly musty, but they're doing a good job to keep it clean and up kind of pub.
Cool.
Highlander would be a good example of that. I mean, I like it. I mean, it reminds me of some of the young boutique bottlings of Linkwood we've had, but with just a bit of sherry layered on top of it. Nice, great. All right, Benrinnes. Now, I should probably disclose this. Yeah, I guess I have written up a tasting note on this. I struggle with Benrinnes probably more than almost any other Speyside distillery. In fact, I can't think of another Speyside distillery I'm generally less excited about than Benrinnes. I don't even remember my tasting note for this one. It's on there. I'm going to share my screen now. This is the darker of the two finishes for sure. And this is Sean's photo. So Sean takes great pride in doing his photos. He does not darken them. So this is the actual colors coming out of it. This is a 12-year-old bottled in January of 2023 after finishing in First Oloroso Sherry, 46%. And Kurt, what do we get on the nose right away? This is like darker and syrupier than the last one.
It's a little meatier too, a little more peppery and stuff. There's It's not port, but it's something the wine team has opened up over the last little while that I'm getting on the nose there too.
It's
I
not.
know it's not sherry, to be really
Oh,
obvious.
sorry, I thought you said it's not pork, and I'm like, wow.
No.
Go from that one. It's not port. It's not sherry. Like Madeira.
Maybe. Well, we wouldn't have opened a Madeira though, unfortunately. But I don't know. There's something that's like reminding me of something we had recently in the shop that on the wine side.
Like Vinsanto, like a Italian sweet wine.
Could be.
I could see a little
At
bit
first,
of
I thought I liked it more, but there's quite a savory umami note on here that I generally don't gravitate towards in whiskeys. Occasionally, there's one like a Cavalan or something that really works, or a Kalila sherry that works. But I'm really intrigued by this. It's got a little bit of Chinese spice in the nose for me too.
My original one said Big Turks. I would also go with like like Turkish Delight. Like it's got that sort of dense jelly, sweet, dusted in sugar note coming off of it too. Like sort of some sour but sweet fruits at the same time. Sean probably does not use a proper color grading card because he's got to shoot a lot of bottles. So yeah. It's Chris's Manischewitz. Chris, we have carried Manischewitz, but it's been about 12 years. When we're looking for kosher wines, we generally set our bar a little higher than Manischewitz. There are some good ones out there, especially from Israel, which is essentially Welch's grape juice with alcohol added in.
Crazy. I'm with you. Benrinnes is kind of it's a tough one most of the time. I've mentioned it before, and I can't remember if it was in our tasting groups here or with my club or whatever. Benrinnes to me is always a bit of burlap and mustiness and damp fabrics and cardboardy notes and stuff. I actually prefer this one to the Linkwood. I think it's cool.
I like the flavor on it. I mean, to me, it's a little bit less complex on the palate. It's not to say that I don't dislike the flavors that are there. I just don't find it overly complex. But yeah, it's good. Again, I think this is, as good an example of a finished whiskey as you're going to find in terms of taking something young, adding sherry to it, having it still be interesting and characterful. So in that regards, I think they've done well with it. But I don't know.
It's comfortably on the palate for me.
Pardon me?
That sits way more comfortably on the palate than the other one does. Like it just seems like a little bit fruitier, a little more balanced. It doesn't dry out into the tannins that I was getting on the first one. It just seems to fit a little better.
Well, it's funny because like I find it like more tannic, more earthy. And I think I'm getting some of that burlap that you were talking about creeping into. So
Seems like I'm the outlier tonight. Everybody's with you, team Andrew.
burlap and cardboard. I mean, is it bad? No, but is it my taste? No. But Kurt, that's why, it's a good thing that everyone doesn't always agree on everything all the time. Otherwise it would be pretty boring. And we oftentimes just for fun, I might dash a little bit of water in there. Oh, Kurt's got some allies. But because these are already 46%, I generally don't like going that route. And then the other caveat to all that is I find whiskeys with an abundance of sherry in them take water even less well than whiskeys that don't. So that would be my advice. Like I wouldn't add water to these. But it's your whiskey. Do with it as you will.
Break it if you choose.
Yeah. Well, Kurt, I think you have at least 2 votes there out of, I think, 6, maybe 7. So you're not getting thrashed. You're not getting thrashed. Okay. Edradour. This is the one of the 3 sherried signatories that is actually proper full-term maturation sherry cask. This is a style that we had as an exclusive for a while. And we had it as an exclusive because one of my customers in Vancouver tipped me off to it. He's like, hey, how come you never get any of the heavily sherried Edradour Signatory? And I was like, I don't even know what you're talking about. It's never on my offer sheet. So we asked and we got it, and it's now opened up. I think many other stores carry it now too. We couldn't keep it to ourselves forever. But it was a nice little treat that we had for quite a while. And the bottlings, by and large, are good. Like I've not had one that I really strongly disliked. Yeah, the question is this an indie? Well, I mean, Gordon MacPhail has bottled a Benromach a couple of Benromachs in the last year, and they have an interesting justification for it. Is that everything that they've bottled for Benromach has been sherry or bourbon matured, and these are both wine cask finishes because they were, and I think they were wine cast. They must have been wine cast by Gordon MacPhail like 10 or 15 years ago. And they thought they were good, but they didn't feel it was appropriate to bottle them under their Benromach label. So that's why they bottled them under their Gordon MacPhail label. But yeah, why does Signatory do this? It's actually kind of clever why they do that. And I'll explain it in a minute. But for now, you'll notice that Sean has whited out the details on the bottle on here. And that's because this is the one that we don't shoot every single time because it's hard to keep track. And sometimes we get in a shipment 2 different casks mixed together because they're at 46%. Like they don't distinguish that much. As soon as they burn through a cask, they bottle another. So we've had times where we've had multiples, but I believe the current cask that we're on right now is number 284. That's the one that the details are from in here, bottled in November 2022. And I've got a tasting note on this one too, but why don't we taste it together and see what we think? Chris has already gone through 2 bottles of this. Chris, you're a legend. You're the one who should be holding the guitar, not Kurt.
Chris, you are a legend in your own mind, buddy. I love the glamour shot too. The whole, struck pose you've got going on there in your picture. I love it.
Gotta see this. I'm gonna have to scroll through. Oh, there we go. Yeah, leave it on the glamour. No, I'm just kidding, Chris. Go back to the live. Well, you don't have to leave it on that. All right, Kurt, what do we think about the nose on this one?
This is not my style of whiskey. We've gone through a bunch of these ones, like you said, a bunch of different editions. I'm obviously an outlier with this because we sell through bucket loads of this stuff. Everybody loves it, and to be honest, it's really, really hard to find cool looking sherry nowadays. It's just a little too big, a little too dumpy for me, a little too heavy-handed. I don't see the spirit through it. All I see is the cask here, and it's just, that's not really my thing. For what it's worth, it's well done. It's big and chocolatey, it's stewy, it's meaty, it's kind of reduced jammy. Just not my thing.
Yeah. Looking through my own tasting note here, kind of said some of those same things, like new school, a tad dumpy, but it has to be said, like for people that are looking for that bigger, thicker sherried style, like there's no flaws in this. It's got layers to it. It's got some complexity. I drink it, but I mean, I don't know that I would pony up to the bar and buy a bottle of this. I mean, I had my sherry phase back when Glenrothes was at its heyday in the Billy Walker years. And I still like a good sherried whiskey, but I'm not a volume guy on that kind of stuff. I like the refill 20 somethings. That's kind of my jam. But interested to hear people's thoughts on this. Chris says it's a comfort food whiskey. I think that's a solid note. Kevin's saying he buys a bottle from each cask. When he started getting them, he's at 5 different ones now. So yeah, Kevin, we'll try to keep track of that for you. Because, I'd thought about doing this at 1.2, like holding back enough to do a 7 whiskey tasting. But we've done that over the years with, like, Kurt, I don't know if you were working with us back when we were doing our like repeated Glendronach verticals in the store, when we would do like 8 or 9 single casks from a batch release. Again, going back to the Billy Walker days and maybe the tail end of just after that. where we would get like all 12 and we would have 2 tastings back to back. And you go through like a dozen sherried whiskeys and 2 tastings and you're kind of exhausted from it. I mean, and basically all you're doing is picking out which ones are better. It's not there's not a lot of variation between them. And they were fun tastings to do, but Kevin, that one might be for you. Get together a group of guys and go through 7 different Edradours and let us know how it works out. Because I'd especially like to know if there's a trajectory, like, are they getting better over time? I mean, Kurt, this is something we've talked about with Edradour in the past. There was a time when Edradour, like 10 years ago, when a lot of what they were bottling was not the best. I think most of their bottlings, except maybe some of the wine cask ones, have been excellent. And they seem to be getting better. Even if it's maybe not necessarily your style or my style, like the quality of wood that they've been putting it in has really improved. And I suppose partly this could be acknowledged to, they only bought the distillery, I think, in 99. And so the whiskeys that are being bottled in like the late 2010s and the late 2000s and the early 2010s was the stuff that they'd inherited. And it was the stuff that they started making themselves that I think has really been, it's been improving over the last decade or so as we've been seeing it.
Yeah, definitely, one of those candidates for most improved. They were really, really rough for a while there. In fact, somebody, Andrew and I were quite close to for a while there. Edradour 10 was his least favorite whiskey in the world. It was one of those things that he used to like joke about, like he'd threaten people with it. They're definitely on the upward trajectory. A lot of what they do, they're really heavy-handed with sherry. There's no 2 ways about it. And that plays right into a lot of people's wheelhouse. I'm an ex-bourbon guy primarily, but there's no 2 ways about it. Andrew, you were kind of referring to it, those Glenrothes ranges. When you get to sit down and taste through a range of Edradour heavily sherried or something like that, it's kind of where you start to go, holy crap, this is a great whiskey. You get that little bit of context that shows you within your flavor band how special something can be. And they do kill it for that. I got to give it to my credit there. But a style I largely shy away from.
Yeah, and didn't we do, like, we did an Edradour tasting earlier this year.
Yeah.
And even though I think the 10 suffers a bit because it's at 40%, it just doesn't have a weight. But when you look at it, it's got a lot of color to it, and it has a lot of that sherry flavor. And that's not coloring, like that's actual, they're using sherry casks in the creation of that style as an intent. And so, I mean, I think there's something to be said about that. Like there's something notable about that they've made that effort to turn the whiskey around and make it about quality. But yeah, I agree. It's not something I get as excited about as seeing something older and refill. Like I would love to see a 20-something refill bourbon Edradour just to see what it's like.
Agreed.
So I don't think I've had one.
No, I don't think I have either, actually. I think you and I are kind of outliers though, because like our Edradour tasting sold out in no time, and we poured another round and that sold out as well. And I think we could have kept going, and I think we actually had to let one of the staff kits go to There's a ton of love for Edradour. Tourism is a huge part of it and everything, of course. It's a tiny little distillery everybody loves to visit. It's very pretty. But the future is bright with Edradour. And I think Andrew's definitely the right guy to be helping it too. Not you, obviously. Symington.
Yeah. Symington's such a character. I was just reading Chris Walker's comment about how he's going to do an Edradour tasting and use vodka as the palate cleanser. So once again, rock star lifestyle, Chris. You're going to burn out like a supernova. You're going to burn bright and then it's going to be over, but it'll be glorious. All right, let's take a little break from sherry. I would suggest, if you really want to, and Kurt and I talked about this at the start, we like to often put sherry towards the back end of the lineup, but because these are all such low ABVs and younger, we thought, let's do the sherry first, and then we'll work our way into the other malts. So I think I shared the link for the Edradour. No, I didn't. I'm going to fire that in the chat, and then I will pull up on the screen the Dailuaine. 1997. So here we go. We're going into refill Hoggy territory. 1997 cask, bottled November 23rd, 2023, 48.2%, 25 years of age. We haven't tried this one yet. I have no tasting note for it. There's nothing else up there. We're going into this one completely blind together. And one thing I'll note, why the hell do they put these on the front of the tins? Like the tins look great. Like put them on the back for God's sake. We asked them that at one point in time, but they never really replied. So anyway, there you go. They do it. No one's really sure why. This is like my classic jelly, like opening a bag of Jelly Bellies and just smelling all the flavors all at once.
There's a lot in here. It's just kind of making me smile. I was like, I can't remember the last time I put a whiskey to my nose and went, holy shit, this is going in a million different directions. I don't even know where to start on this one. I don't think it's very balanced, where you kind of look for everything to be nice and harmonious, but it's way cooler for it. This one's awesome.
Yeah, but
I'm in love with the nose on this.
so for anyone who caught my tasting note either on Instagram or in the newsletter, the Crofton Gia from the Whiskey Trail is kind of the same thing. Like it is weird, but it's wonderful at the same time. And I really, really dug it. And sometimes, Kurt, when you get those like unbalanced, a little bit crazy whiskeys, they can be a lot of fun. Not unlike humans. Get somebody who's just a little bit off kilter in the right way, and you can have a lot of fun with them.
This whole room full of unbalanced people we're hanging out with tonight.
Or if it's just like me, you're just hanging on by a thread.
We all just have a slightly different sense of balance than the rest of the world. It's all right. This is cool. I think this is a pre sort of waxy Dailuaine too. I'm not getting much of that waxy character here. I do get a little bit of a, I don't know, maybe it's slightly floral or something there. A lot of weird fruit tones going in a lot of different directions, like kumquat and orange and like.
Yeah, no, there's
everything.
Tons of like exotic, faintly tropical fruits on this.
I thought I was getting a little bit of sunflower seed, not quite sunflower oil or anything, but a little bit of sunflower seed in there too. Kumquat kind of tangy, really tangy. There's a little almost citric, but yeah. Kumquats are quite good.
Oh yeah, Kurt, 2015 is when they changed the fermentation to try to get it waxier spirit. Yeah. So the other thing is the condensers. Dailuaine's one of those outliers, and I remember reading this up the other day. So I wanted to confirm. It doesn't have worm tubs, but it is a spirit that has traditionally been a bit meatier. Although this one is not meaty really at all, but it was meatier because their condensers are mostly stainless steel as opposed to copper. And they do that to kind of reduce that copper contact, which is fascinating because you're going around distilleries, Kurt, you've been around probably 20 or 30 distilleries. I think I'm at like 70 something or more. I don't remember seeing anything but copper condensers anywhere. Even in the worm tubs. So that's a bit of unusual, but apparently they've replaced those. They're now back to copper. So they got rid of those in 2015. But yeah, the nose is fruity. I would say it's not quite waxy, but it's like parchment paper. Like there's something a little bit like a waxy note in there, but it's not really waxy.
The palate's a bit shy. The palate's a little dry. Slightly cardboardy again.
Yeah. And you're not going cardboardy in a corked kind of way, are you?
Almost on the palate, but it's not though. And it's not like a corked whiskey or anything. You just kind of get those in, well, I hate to say it, but sherry. So I don't know if this is sherry hoggies. They're never really specific with that. Who knows?
Well, it might be that's that little bit of a meaty, earthy, meaty character coming through on the back end.
Could be.
I've tossed a little water in mine just to see what happens. I agree. Like the nose is such a fruit bomb. The palate's it's good, but it's not crazy.
I'd happily drink it, but I was way more excited when I nosed it than when I drank it.
The interesting thing is I find it gets waxier and oakier, toastier, nuttier when you add the drop of water in there. So yeah, jury's out on that one for me. I'm excited to see how it kind of continues to evolve in the glass. But I would very happily drink that one. So what are some of the comments here? It's a little like a fruity Loch Lomond 12. Like the nose better than the palate. Big fan of this one. Musty, a little bit tart, almost fizzy sherbet. So there you go. Dave's a fan. It's got potential. I'm willing to see what happens on this one. All right, let's move on to, and I'm pretty sure just checking again that I put the link to this one. I'll just put it in the chat again anyway. If I haven't already. So there we go. There's the Dailuaine. Let's move on to the Glenrothes. And if I remember correctly, yeah, this is one I actually quite liked. And I'm Kurt, we've talked about this before, as many things, and many of these people will have heard some of these things many times. Glenrothes is another distillery I actually struggle with a lot. And I think I struggle with it a lot because a lot of it's in sherry, and a lot of that sherry is not the best. I've had more heavily sulfured Glenrothes than I think any other single malt. And I think it's because whether it was Edrington, well, it must have been Edrington, they just cheaped out on the casks that were going to Glenrothes for a long time. And the reason why that's kind of a shame is that Glenrothes, Kurt was talking about how Linkwood was a top dresser malt. And this is a term that they used in the blending industry, where you didn't need a lot, but you would add a little to give you a specific character you wanted. And in case of Linkwood, it was like that really soft, fruity character. In the case of Glenrothes, I think it was a mix of like citrus and floral. Regardless, these like heavily sulfured sherry butts, completely wiped this character out. So we'll see how this one does. 26 years old, from a hogshead. Doesn't say, but it's probably a refill hogshead. Filled on May 20th, 1996, and bottled September 28, 2022, 53.6%. So, Kurt, I've been blabbing. What do you get on this one on the nose?
It's very rare. I love a Glenrothes, but I love this. This is really cool. Yeah, you and I have way too similar tastes sometimes, and I feel bad for some people that have to listen to us say the same thing over and over again sometimes. This is awesome. I get like ex-bourbon kind of shining through, some of those cherry tones, lots of cinnamon and everything, but I also get the jammy like sherry top notes as well. This is everything Glenrothes should be, and it disappoints me that they're not. I don't expect to like this one as much. We did try this at the festival when we cracked one. I thought it was good then. I actually think it's way better than good.
Yeah, it needed to breathe probably. This to me is like just like all sorts of candied nuts. It's like going to the farmer's market and there's the stand with like all the different kind of candied nuts you can think of, and just the aroma lingering off that. There is some nice fruit in there, as you said, like, and I was reading my tasting note, it alluded to it there too. Probably a sherry seasoned hoggy at some point in time, as opposed to a bourbon seasoned hoggy. So you're getting some of those sherry notes off on the nose. I haven't gotten to the palate yet though, so we'll have to see. I do find though it's got that sort of floral hop note that some of those better, not overly oaked Glenrothes bottlings had.
You know those like those drop cookies or whatever with the little like thumbprint in them, and you put like jam or something in the middle.
Jammy
of them?
Dodgers.
Kind of like almost like a homemade version, sort of. It kind of reminds me of those on the nose.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really blown away by this one, actually. Did not expect this at all. Thimble cookies, well done.
Ah,
My grandma used to make killer ones.
yeah, it's fruity, it's soft, floral, toasty. There's nice spices in there. There's elements of sherry cask, but that's not the dominant character coming out. It's got a nice balance to it. It's a good drinking strength for this whiskey too.
And I love that it's not, one of those tight back ends where it dries out the sides of your mouth and everything. It's quite juicy on the palate, which a lot of times those sherry whiskeys can be very, very dry. I like that. And I have to ask you, Andrew, how much of the Glenrothes struggle is just our personal bias over the years of like being burnt so many times with sulfur, being bored with 40% whiskeys, being inundated with these grenade bottles that don't fit anywhere, with like, there's so much about Glenrothes that's been easy to pick on over the years. How much of it is just residual carryover from that?
I mean, I think there's some, and actually, one other bias that I should probably acknowledge, and it's kind of weird because for almost 30 years, like Glenrothes was not owned, but the brand was owned by Berry Brothers, and Berry Brothers did the bottlings. And because of another store in town, much larger than mine, that had a virtual monopoly on the best Glenrothes bottlings, we just didn't even bother playing with Glenrothes. We would just play with what the Berry Brothers guys could offer us. And so we'd get a ton of cool things from them over the years. Things like that 40-year-old blend, that like tropical sherry blend. We got tons and tons of interesting things from them. And Kurt, it's funny, I've never really thought of it that way, but like looking back on it from a Freudian perspective, it could be that I'm unintentionally too hard on Glenrothes because I feel like it was not willing to play ball with me 20 years ago. So that could be true, but I will say that in all sincerity, I've had way more sulfur sherried Glenrothes than any other single malt I can think of. So I'm going to try adding a drop of water to this just for fun. Alex is saying this is the best one yet for him. Sammy's saying, oh yeah, the comment about the jammy Dodgers. I and others I know haven't loved them either. This is the best one I've ever had. So there you go. I know Phil and Suzanne were referencing the Ronnie's tasting we did with Ronnie Cox when he retired from Berry Brothers. Ronnie Cox was the guy who traveled around the world to talk about Glenrothes to people. So he was, for almost 30 years, the public face of Glenrothes. And he was famous for his red socks. So everybody who took part in that tasting got a pair of red wool socks, which was kind of fun. But yeah, we had a crazy good lineup for that. Like, we went all the way up. Did we do the 68 and the 69 too? Did we do the whole? Yeah, we did the whole shebang. It was crazy. We had, I'm just trying to think here. There was 79, 75, 68, 69, something from the 80s, maybe 89.
89. Yeah.
89. And then there was one other, like a bottling from the 90s. It was an awesome tasting. Absolutely awesome.
Yeah, the 9s were awesome. The 9s were beating the 8s. Like I remember there was a 78 and a 79 in there, and 79 was better.
Yeah. There is the page for the, thanks Phil, 92, 95. Yeah, this Glenrothes is getting better. It took water okay. I probably personally wouldn't add it, but it's going into like Starburst fruit candy territory for me now on the palate. It's nice. Lots of layers to that one. I agree. It's a lovely Glenrothes. And I've had some good Glenrothes. It's just, yeah, it's never been a showstopper for me. And it's funny when distributors are like, oh, I got a great Glenrothes, you're gonna love it. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna have to try it first. Because I don't have a ton of confidence in it. Having said that, I think we've had a couple of these 96 Glenrothes from Signatory, and they've been good. So there you go. Benrinnes, we're back to the one that we love the least, Kurt. Twice in one tasting.
Yep.
But there's a big but in this. And the big but in this, and I'm going to have to give credit to one of our Anorak friends here in town, Devin. Devin tipped me off to this about 5, maybe 6 years ago. He's like, make sure you get some of the 1996 Signatory Benrinnes. So I asked, it wasn't on the offer sheet. We got some, and this is going back, I want to say like 19 or 20, probably 2017 or 2018. And it was a tropical fruit bomb. And it was an absolutely gorgeous whiskey. So we've been buying at least a case or a couple of cases of each of the 96s that have been bottled since, because they're all kind of in that territory. And maybe, Kurt, our problem with Benrinnes is just that Benrinnes can't be rushed. Benrinnes needs time, needs 20 plus years, and then it's interesting.
Interesting does not mean good. I've had some really bad older Benrinnes too. I've had some really good ones. There's an 18-year-old Cadenhead we've talked about before. I think there was an older one, maybe a gold label from Cadenhead as well at one point. We cracked this one for the festival with the Glenrothes, and the whole staff fell in love with this. This is wicked. This is exactly what I like for whiskey. I would demolish a bottle of this.
Yeah. So here we go. 1996, 50, what does it say? 53.5%. We're now up at, what is this here? 26 years. I think the first one we brought in was 21 years, 20 or 21 years, and it was in 1996. And Kurt, you know, we have to be careful here that our bias for years isn't creeping in, because 1996 was a significant year for both of us, you know, and we came of adulthood in 1996, one could say.
We came, we drank, we conquered.
That's right.
And then we're conquered by the alcohol. Yeah, this is awesome. I don't know what to say. I was looking forward to revisiting this one tonight. I was kind of thinking it wasn't going to live up to where I had it in my mind, but now I'm also sad I don't have these.
It's sweet, it's floral, it's going in that tropical direction on the fruit side of things. Yeah, it's a beautiful whiskey. All of these have been great. And I think they've been great because these were casks destined for blending 15 years ago that Andrew Symington bought up, put them in his warehouse, and just hung on to them until they were ready to go. And to me, like, that's, you know, in a perfect world, that's what all independent bottlers should be doing. But I mean, there's been this mad rush in the whiskey world in the last few years, and people have either been tempted to cash in, or maybe it's a cash flow issue. I, as a business owner, can fully understand that, where you're trying, you got to sell what you have, or you can't bring in something else. And, you know, for a well-capitalized business like Signatory, where they're able to buy 40 casks of the same thing, and some are going to be great, most are going to be okay, a few are going to be rubbish. And, you know, maybe you finish the rubbish ones, the ones that are okay, you just give them more time to mature, and you bottle the ones that are good now. And I wish more independent bottlers would take that kind of approach, because a lot of times, you know, you're told like, this is incredible, great, awesome, but really it's just what they were able to get from the secondary market. And it's what they're able to access. So
I like when we find these bottlings that kind of shape your shitty beliefs in the distillery's ineptitude. I like when you have to kind of open, okay, fine, I've been a little too hard on these guys. Maybe I have to be a little more accepting. And don't push this. I'm not talking about Laphroaig here, but some Ardmores lately have been great. Some Benrinnes have been great. There's some cool stuff coming up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to Jeff's point about businesses don't have access to unlimited free capital. Yes, that is true. It is an issue, but but I guess that's what you call real life. So. Interestingly, though, if you own casks, you can borrow up to 80% of the value of your cask to buy more casks. So if you're clever about it, I think that's how guys like Sukhinder Singh built up stockpiles of old Islay whiskey and things like that back in the day, is they were just smart about what they bought, and then they leverage that to buy more. So there are ways to do it, but there's the problem is there's way too many independent bottlers, and there's way too many people dabbling in buying casks for investment purposes, which, by the way, don't sign up for an Instagram sponsored advertised whiskey investment thing. It's probably a pyramid scheme, but I'm just saying that. Okay, we got one left in the first go round. This might be the one that all of you were here for. Some of you were here for. Sadly, it is also the only one in tonight's lineup that is completely sold out. But I digress. Here we go. Signatory Unnamed Islay Laphroaig 1990, 51.9%. So we've had a few of these over the last couple of years. Again, I think someone tipped me off to these. This is the same parcel of whiskey that Pete's Beast bottled as the 30-year, that we've seen others from Whiskey Sponge more recently. And I don't know if we've got any bottles left. If we do, there's only one or two. We had an Archives Islay 1990. I mean, everybody, this is the same casks that everybody's been going after. And they're these ex-bourbon casks, 1990 vintage, unnameable Islay whiskey that is almost certainly Laphroaig. Oh, it's got a nice nose to it. So
those days of being so romanced by the massive peat monsters. You could give it to me at 60% and 5 years old and absolutely reeking like you just burnt a bunch of unwashed people or something. I was in heaven. But you know as well as I do, when you start to hit these like 3-decade kind of Islay malts where the smoke is faint, where the fruit tones are up front, where they start to get orangey and melony and stuff like that. There's like nothing like them. They're so pretty.
When the phenols get oily, like they become kind of oily and soft. Yeah, this is the nose on this alone. I could just sit with a glass of this for an hour or two, just nosing it, taking the odd sip.
A little bit of like marzipan. There's like white dough or something. There's like white cake, melon, lots of fruit tones, lots of orange here. Orange and lime I always get on Laphroaig, and I think that's telltale that it's Laphroaig too.
There's tons of lime in here. Like for me, this is like the dregs of a mezcal Rita, a lime mezcal Rita, like when you get the sugar and the citrus and that little trace of mezcal at the very end. It's fruity, it's getting oily and almost waxy as well.
Sometimes there's no filter between here and here. Just so you know, guys.
For Chris?
No, I'm just being asked how many homeless, or not homeless, unwashed people I burned. Oh my God, this is getting worse. I'm gonna stop talking now.
Oh my God.
So bad.
Yeah, that's this took a weird turn.
None, absolutely none. Nor have I smelled any. It's just the writer in me. Moving on. Anyways, great whiskey.
So I took a sample vial of this with me on my trip to the UK because I wanted to get a tasting note written up. And I was at my hotel one night and I logged onto our website to write a tasting note for it. And I noticed that it had sold out. So I just poured the entire vial into my glass, shut my computer and read my book and had a dram of this. And it was pretty awesome. So I don't think I ever got around to writing a tasting note for this one. Nor do I need to because it's gone. But it's just a great example of this distillery at an old age when it really softens out, when it really mellows out, and I think it shows really nicely.
Do you know what the price was on this one, Andrew? Sorry,
yeah, it was $7. Sorry, 1 second here. Come on, website. Stop doing this. $7.65.
So because it's an unnamed Islay from this magical parcel of allied stock from, I think there was a bunch from 1990, 91, and 92.
91, yeah.
Allied at the time owned Laphroaig and Ardbeg. There was speculation it was Ardbeg, but of course it wasn't Ardbeg, it was Laphroaig. But look at what comparable distillery bottlings would cost you now. Like the 27 Laphroaig is 1,500. Like this is a no-brainer purchase, and it's so much prettier and higher strength. Like, wow.
So this whiskey here is almost certainly the exact same parcel. And what's weird about a lot of this stuff is it was probably vatted and then filled in. I believe one of the stories I heard is that it was vatted and then put back into casks. So this was done by Archives under the Fishes of Samoa label. Sadly, the price on this is a little bit more, but that's because I think just 12 bottles came to the country and they were air freighted in, which all that stuff adds money. But this is another example of that whiskey and that style, and it's absolutely loved. But it's
Coincidentally also 51.9. Did you notice that?
Is it the same ABV?
Yeah.
Here, I'll put that back up for a second. That's crazy. I did not notice that. Yeah, it is the exact same ABV. Crazy. But you know, Kurt, it does make you wonder, like, we know, like we've had these whiskeys from Angus as well, from the Whiskey Sponge. And we know that Angus is getting his whiskeys from Signatory, or at least a good chunk of them. Maybe Archives is getting some of their whiskeys from Signatory too. So hard to say. We aren't able to get more of this particular bottling. There likely will be others, another one at some point this year, but the price will go up. But it'll probably be less than, it might be about the same or less than the Archives one, but it's one that it's getting harder and harder to come by. And yes, Sasha, the Port Askeg 28, again, because that was bottled a few years earlier, I would say there's a very high probability that it's from that same parcel, because we're talking again about an Islay whiskey that's mellowed, it's softened, it's not quite as briny and fiery and ashy, you know, as the young one. So I'll put that up on the screen too, because that's one that we actually do have access to. And thank you for mentioning that, because I did not even think about it, because it's still available, which is awesome. So here's the Port Askeg 28 year, which is from Elixir Distillers. Rather than bottling single casks, they just parceled whatever they got to into a vatting of about 3,000 bottles that they've released globally. So this is still available. We have some in stock now, and we have access to a little bit more, but this isn't going to last forever either.
That's a crazy price.
Mm-hmm. Well, just think, Kerr, like 3 years ago, this was $400 a bottle. But like, you know, the fact that it's only 500 now, I mean, especially with the way things have gone inflation-wise and whiskey-flation-wise, it could be worse.
There was a comment about the lower strength by Kevin. Interestingly enough, I don't know who knows.
They diluted it down to 45.
That's the Talisker strength, right? And
Well,
we talked about 46 being that barrier to chill filtration. It's actually 45.8 from everything I've heard is kind of that's where you start to lose that haze. So it could be that it was an intentional decision to just hit that kind of baseline mark.
It absolutely was. And then this is their 25 year, same thing, 45.8. They were just trying to get it to a point where they could get the most bottles, sell them to the most people, rather than do it at cask strength. So
admirable they're doing it without compromising. Like, again, you don't have to filter, so you're still giving people what they want. And we talked about it earlier with that, you know, the strength we were talking about. I think with the 46, it's something, maybe it was you, Andrew, that was bemoaning the strength there. 46 to 52 is my real happy place for the way it sits on the tongue without any kind of prickle, being able to pull the most flavor out of it. I'll happily take it at 60, but I'm not going to turn away 40 either. But 46 to 52 is kind of ideal.
Yeah. All right. It's time for the speed round. So we're going to go back through, see how these have evolved. Then we've got a poll. We'll do a vote. So Kurt, back to the Linkwood. Not your most bueno whiskey of the night.
So I did like most of these actually. The decent, more floral now than I got the first time around, I think. It's kind of fallen a little bit flat. I think it's just a long time in the glass. Something was low. Still pretty.
It reminds me of something very British I had once a long time ago, Cherries Jubilee on the nose. So
I don't even know what that is, but I know the name, or I've heard of it, and I love cherries. What is it?
I think it's like a custardy dessert with cherries in it. Simmering cherries with orange and then flambéed with brandy and served over vanilla ice cream. So Cherries Jubilee, that's what it is.
I'm going hunting next month.
I think they only serve it in Jubilee years, Kurt. So you got to wait another 60 years. When Charles has his 60th coronation Jubilee, you'll be able to have Cherries Jubilee. So if you're still around. What are the thoughts? What are the thoughts on the Linkwood on the second time around?
On that nice little sip of mortality there while we're drinking away. It's okay.
I don't want to be here in 60 years.
No, me neither. It's okay. That's all I can say. It's okay. I like the nose a lot more than the palate at first, but now I'm kind of getting a slight floral note across it all. Not quite drier sheets, but something that's kind of muted and I don't know. Not my love.
Kevin's saying I actually really enjoyed the Linkwood, close to my favorite of the lineup. I think the most sessionable whiskey of this entire lineup is probably that Linkwood. That's the one that I could probably drink the most of in a single sitting. So without wearing my palate out and without, blowing my brains out on ABV, I quite dig it. What about the Benrinnes?
The nose right at first seems more challenging. Now I get cinnamon and cola and stuff on the nose a bit too. But the palate, kind of big and meaty and everything. The palate is just juicier. It's got more going on. I still prefer this one to the last one. And I think the palate is held up way more than the previous one too. I'm
getting a tomato soup note on the nose.
I can see that for sure. It's a meaty, savory, umami-ish kind of whiskey, I think.
Well, it's reminding me of Phil and Sebastian's espresso. They've got it's got a bit of a tomatoey note to it too. But I like it. I find it's a tad sharp on the palate for me. And I don't know if I'm assuming that's the sherry, that's the tannins of the sherry creeping in, but I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But I think we have to continue to agree to disagree on those, Kurt.
Good by me.
What about the Edradour?
Now, I might now steal Chris's appellation for Linkwood. I like Longwood better.
Is it because of Willy Wonka, or is that?
I don't know.
Longwood?
That's Chris.
Longwood, you know what? We should open a distillery near Linkwood and call it Longwood. That'd be funny.
It's interesting to me that some of the notes you guys have thrown out between these first two are kind of the opposite. Did we mispour some of these, or I literally have the glass in front of the label, so I know I've got the right glass, but I'm wondering if we mispoured some of these or something, because that soapiness to me I'm getting on the first one that you're getting on the second one, and we had some backwards notes here. Interesting.
There's some interesting Longwood detours being taken in the chat. We'll just let that play out on its own. Kurt, Edradour.
Yeah, it's there. It noses better than the first time around.
I like it on the palate better than I did the first time around too. Chocolate, Christmas cake, treacle sauce, spices. It's what you want from a dumpy young sherry bomb. And it is the only one I think of the three that is a proper sherry bomb.
Do you think the cask will still have full sherry when they filled it?
I mean, yeah, it could have been wet fill and they didn't dump it. It's possible. But I have to say, I think that's often where big sherried whiskeys go wrong, is when they have left it in. So just knowing what I know about Symington and the Signatory guys, I'm sure they dump it before they put the whiskey in. I'd be shocked if they did anything else. All right, back to the Dailuaine.
This has to be sherry. I know it says hockey, but I am getting more of those corky tones now. Slightly soapy, slightly corky.
Yeah, I can see that. I'm getting a bit of a funk, like a cheesy funk to it too. And I know Dailuaine has a fairly long fermentation. I'm pretty sure it's over 100 hours, which for most commercial distilleries is a fairly long fermentation. But yeah, it's kind of, it's good, but just knowing what we tried after it, it's kind of bland.
I am getting some more waxiness now on the palate, more of those cardboardy kind of tones now. For those that are kind of curious, by the way, that waxiness that's made Clynelish famous, and I think Dailuaine is probably doing the same thing now. It's not cleaning out their four shots receiver properly. First run is captured, and all those oils just sit in there, and they don't clean it out, and it builds.
And they call it gunk. That's the
Gunk.
technical term for it, which is amazing. It's gunk in the tank.
You know what?
Gunk in the trunk, Kurt.
Gunk and oh my god.
Gunk in the trunk. We could get someone to rap about that.
That's amazing. It's such a whiskey geek joke, but it's so amazing. You threw me completely off. I forgot what I was going to say now.
I love how Jeff is watching us from out at the lake somewhere.
Living large, buddy. I love it. I'm jealous.
Living the dream. All right. Are we on? Let's move on to the Glenrothes. The speed round kind of slowed. We got to keep the pace up for the speed round. So
jammy cherry notes, raspberry notes now. This Glenrothes is wicked.
Yeah, like a summer fruit bowl, like a mixed fruit bowl. I forget what it is. I think my mom poured, oh yeah, she pours elderflower liqueur into the fruit bowl. And I think it's to keep the fruit from like starting to brown while it's in the bowl. So also you're adding a little bit of alcohol in there. So who can disagree with that?
Good palate too. That's a really good whiskey all around. I like that one.
Chris is saying Gunk in the Trunk should be an SMWS bottling. I think Gunk in the Trunk could be a KWM t-shirt, and maybe we need to really like actually activate on this one, because on the front it could say something like, who doesn't love a little Clynelish? And then on the back it could say, I'm all about the Gunk in the Trunk.
A series of KWM shirts. I love it.
And it would need to have a cat on it of some kind, like an innocent looking but possibly vicious kitten. I think that would kind of round the whole thing out. Glenrothes is still great, floral, fruity, super refill. Like there's not a lot of oak presence on this at all. It's lovely. Look, Chris, we just need people to help support us in our dream of one day executing on a t-shirt.
You too can fund a poor starving KWM employee by buying one of these t-shirts for just.
So I don't approve. I'm willing to concede that Sasha somehow wins the background game, but I don't understand why. Or no, Kevin wins it. Sorry, Kevin. Sasha said Kevin. Oh, yeah, but that's some fake shit, right? Like that's some CGI, AI. I mean, Kevin, I hope for you that that's your real background, but we'd probably see your hair blowing in the wind if it was. So it's probably not real, but anyway, I'm still going with the Jeff Surja background. All right, Kurt, Benrinnes, we got to keep this thing rolling. Evan's not here to keep us on the straight and narrow, so.
Yeah, the meandering path is way more fun. Benrinnes is good. I still love it. I think the Glenrothes is actually holding up better longer in the glass here. It's a little more exciting now. I kind of want a fresh pour of each to see how they are fresh again. But right now, the Glenrothes is kind of pulled ahead a little bit on that one, surprisingly.
You know what, Kurt? We might be 2 for 2 tonight. I think I disagree with you on that. I think I like the Benrinnes better. I find the Benrinnes, it's juicy, it's soft, it's fruity. I could possibly session that in addition to the Linkwood, just mix them up 1 for 1.
Yeah, that's definitely an easy drinker on that one. And I love it. Like I said, I fell in love with it when we opened it, but I don't know. That Glenrothes is just more vibrant right now. It's showing bigger.
It's a little like the sherbet they serve you in a fancy meal just before you get your main course, but after your starter. It's very refreshing. It's like
when I bounce back to the Glenrothes after that one, the Glenrothes is so full of cherry tones right up into those.
Kurt, I think you probably missed it, but I thought that was a good transition joke about junior mints. It's very refreshing. It's a 90s thing. Some of you might know what I'm talking about, others not. It's okay. It's all right. Oh man. And then that Laphroaig. God. To be fair, Sammy, the only time I'm ever served sherbet in between courses is if I go for dinner with my parents, because I don't go to those kind of restaurants either. And it's not so much that they're fancy, it's just they're kind of stuffy and old-fashioned would probably be the more appropriate. But anyway, I'm getting hot tub ozone on the nose on this one. No, it's still awesome.
I definitely get that ozoniness, but I haven't spent enough time in a hot tub in a long time, apparently. I am getting some charry seafood notes now, too. That's cool.
I really love how those peat phenols just round out, but they become buttery and oily after time. It's awesome. I'm sorry we don't have any, but as several people have pointed out here, the Port Askaig 28-year-old is still out there. And you know what, Kurt? We should put that into another tasting at some point.
Yeah.
We should talk about that whiskey again because it was a lot of fun. All right. I'm
Port Askaig right now.
What's that?
We do a whole Port Askaig range right now.
Like a whole Port Askaig tasting?
Mm-hmm. I know we've got 800 proof, 25, 28. I think we've got 45.
Who wouldn't want to try that 45 again, just to have 45-year-old sherry Bunnahabhain? It's true. All right. Well, we might have to try to make that happen. All right. I'm going to trigger the poll, which hopefully, yeah, it looks like it's in the correct order. So you got a few minutes there to pick your favorites from the first and second choices. While we're doing that, interesting things coming up in the future. Cool stuff coming in all the time. We've got a new release of Malt Barn bottlings next week or the week after. I'm not sure when they're going to clear customs. We have other casks on the way. We have an Ammered cask that I've been assured will be here probably by September, but it's coming, so you can never be sure. What's that, Kurt?
2027
on Indian time. So it'll, and not Indian time in terms of the people, but more their bureaucracy. They're a very bureaucratic people. There's a lot of paperwork to be filled out. We have a Bladnock coming from Gordon MacPhail that's been delayed until later in August or possibly September. Still coming. It's cool. There's not many bottles. There's a Benrinnes, an absolute tropical fruit bomb Benrinnes coming in September. There'll be another cask coming probably before that we'll offer, I would imagine early in August, possibly later, we'll see. Still to be determined. Yeah, there's cool stuff in the pipeline. And we picked the Kilchoman cask today, Kurt.
We did. It was awesome too. If you guys are Kilchoman fans, I don't know what to say. We've had some great Kilchoman casks over the years. This one absolutely beats the last 3 or 4 we've had, I think. Sean actually came in today to help us taste this. All 3 of us kind of looked at each other and we're like, okay, this is really, really damn good. Mm-hmm. So I can't wait for that one to arrive now. It's kind of the kid at Christmas where you know how far away it is, and patience.
It'll be here before we know it. But I mean, I've said this many times. My favorite Kilchomans are the 100% Islay. I think you see a bit more of the spirit because there's a little bit less of the peat. And then like the best floor malted whiskeys, that peating level is variable. It's never, it changes. It's not consistent. And yeah, I love that whiskey style. It's my favorite Kilchoman whiskey style. And Anthony has kindly bottled us a 10-year-old version of it. So that's exciting. It's coming. I would guess November. I'd be surprised if it's here before November. But there's cool stuff coming down the pipeline. We've got some errands coming in September. Technically one, but there might be some leftover from a club bottling of that as well too. So lots of stuff to keep you informed in. Let's check in on the poll here, see where we're at. So round one, we have, wow, the Unnamed Islay thrashed the rest of the lineup. The Glenrothes finished second. And I do note, I apologize, I got the Glenrothes and the Benrinnes mixed up there. But interestingly, the Linkwood had some votes going to round two. It's all about Benrinnes, then Glenrothes, and then a tie between the Edradour and the Unnamed Islay. So I think we can safely declare that the Unnamed Islay is the clear winner. Benrinnes appears to be, it might be a tie between Benrinnes and Glenrothes for second favorite. So there you go. Now, Kurt, everyone's voted, so we can sort of share our favorites now. I have a sense of where you're going, but if you had to pick two whiskeys from the lineup tonight, what would they be?
The Unnamed Islay and the Glenrothes. Both awesome.
Yeah.
I would happily pick a couple of the other ones too. Right behind those would be the Benrinnes. And on any given day, maybe the Benrinnes would pick the Glenrothes for me. I don't know. That one just showed really well tonight. And I think the first two would probably beat the Edradour and Dailuaine for me. So interesting range.
Well, and I mean, maybe that's a comment on where our palates are at, where we're like kind of over too much big dumpy sherry.
Yeah.
I'm with you on the 100, the Islay. I think that's a standout favorite for me in tonight's lineup, and I'm not really surprised by that. But I'm going to give my second favorite to the Benrinnes. I thought that it's just beautiful. I could drink a ton of that and be very happy with it. And Sammy, good for you for buying a condo and some cars. Don't overspend on whiskey. You know, there'll always be something there later. But and Phil and Suzanne are on my team tonight on this. So awesome. Kurt, anything else we should add before we go? Does anyone have any questions? Any burning questions that are there that we need to clear up before we wrap up tonight? Kurt?
I don't have anything to add. This was fun. This was a little bit of a kind of just shoot from the hip, random tasting, aside from them all being from a certain person as the source. But it was so varied. I had a ton of fun with this lineup.
Oh. Yeah, I don't either. I'm looking forward to next week's Compass Box tasting. Then we got Daft Mill the week after that, and I've got a bunch of new photos and possibly insight to share about Daft Mill and the character who runs that place. And then yeah, there's more to come. Well, everyone, I want to thank you for taking part tonight. I know it's the summer. You got other things to do with your time. Like Jeff, you could be sitting by a lake right now. But regardless, I hope you all have an awesome rest of your week. Hopefully we'll see you at one of our other tastings in the weeks ahead. And if not, I hope you have a great summer. We'll talk to you soon. Kurt, thanks for co-hosting with me tonight. And everybody have a great night and be great. And we'll talk soon. Okay.